Now, on the last episode, we pretty much talked about where I had gone to school, but the one place we didn't talk about was where I did my graduate studies. And it was here, Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. Well, welcome to another episode, actually a new season of Artifact. So before we start, like, subscribe, hit that like button if you like what we're seeing here, because this next season is going to be really great. Okay, what we're going to be talking about this year is going to be in this episode or this season is going to be color theory. We're going to be working a lot about what's going on about color theory. But before we get started on this, let's go take a look at what this university is like. And actuality, Liberty's kind of controversial because of the fact that there are some people who think it's not a real university because Dr. Falwell was the one who started this. But if we kind of go with that kind of thought, then we're kind of looking at also, we're not really flying real airplanes because the Wright brothers, they were actually bicycle designers before they even got into that. Anyway, we're not going to get into any of that. But here, this is the area, the main quad area. As you can see, all in this area here that we have. Another place I'm going to take you is where I went to school, which is the School of Communication and Visual Design. We're going to head over there real quick. So let's head over there and I'll show you that, and then we'll get started on what we're going to do with color theory. This is the School of Communication and the Arts. I know I said a little earlier that Liberty was somewhat controversial to some people. And the reason is another reason for that is, believe it or not, Liberty has more accreditations than Harvard or Yale. Seriously. And it's even tougher to go through the grading process. The difference between Harvard, Yale, and Liberty is that they've been there for hundreds of years, but Liberty has put its standards even higher. The School of Arts, in which I attended, has a lot of growth, and it's really grown in a lot of areas as far as working in the animation, 3D modeling, illustration, sculpture, etc., etc. But the main course that I'm actually going to be talking about here is, I said, color and color theory. It's what we're going to be working on, and delving into that hard area of understanding how to neutralize color, how to get color to actually be bright, and how to neutralize them for background areas. It's really been a wonderful ride, what we're working on, but we're going to find out just how tough color theory is. So here we go on the second season, first episode of Color Theory. Let the color begin.
Whoa, look at those vivid colors.
Relax. Look at the bright colors. It's nice.
Just look at all those colors. You think that's natural?
Look at the color of that sky.
True colors are beautiful.
Hello, boys! I'm back!
Great. Well, here we are. Season 2. As I said earlier, from when we were earlier at Liberty, color theory. Okay, so what makes color theory so hard? Well, first of all, let's take that last word, theory. It's not color law, it's a theory. It's not a proven fact, it's a theory. It's a concept. Just the word theory itself emotes a lot of complicated things. And when we kind of just go through that word, it really doesn't amount to much of what we're talking about. As in music theory, it's not a precise science. It's not exact. It varies. It jumps back and forth. And that's exactly what makes this so complicated. In fact, you can even tell when there's a bad painting or when there's a bad illustration by a artist who isn't experienced in color theory. You can see it in their work. I see it all the time, especially with students. You see it a lot more in sunsets. But let's start off with the basics. The first thing that we're going to talk about are going to be the 3 primary colors, which are red, blue, yellow. And the other thing we're also going to add into this, as I said earlier, is we're going to be talking about black and white, which aren't colors. Black is a shade, which means it darkens that color. White is a tint. It lightens it. If you add black or white to any of the color, it doesn't change the color whatsoever. It just simply shifts its value. It simply moves it to either a darker shade or a lighter tint. If you add another color to that color, such as, let's say, blue, it doesn't become light blue and dark blue anymore. It literally changes its color hue, or the pigment changes. So if you add red to the blue, it becomes purple, thus your secondary color. Black and white doesn't have that ability to do that. It just has the ability to change the shade or change the tint. Hence the reason why they're not colors. So if we take black and add white, and we know that one's a shade and one is a tint, and we combine these two, we end up what we call with a neutral. Kind of like in chemistry. When you add a pH and an acid and you mix them together, they become a neutral. They're now a neutral. And that's exactly what happens with gray. It's a neutral. But that also becomes rather complicated too, because when you add gray and you say, oh, we want a gray matte or we want a neutral matte, that's not easy either. Because you can lay up different types of grays. You can have a gray which you think is a simple gray. And if you lay it up with several different grays, you're going to see some reds, some greens, some yellows, some blues, and it's hard to match a neutral. You see where I'm coming from? When you add a primary color, blue for instance, and you use just primary colors, you can't just use your primary color blue, just any blue. That's not going to work. That's also the same thing that's going to be true with reds and yellows. You just can't use any kind of red, any kind of yellow. There's a certain pigment, and some yellows have more of a red to them, and some have more of a blue to them, and they have more of a green tint and more of a blue tint, and then some of them are relatively light. And it's the same thing with reds. As a matter of fact, some reds you're going to get are more toward the oranges. Then there's magenta. Then you have the blue, which in some cases you have cyan. Now in printing, you have cyan, magenta, black, yellow. And that's a whole different ballgame altogether because that's used in printing and not in painting. We'll get into all that. But this is why I'm saying in this episode, color theory, to go through all the depths of what we're going to go through, is basically going to be able to show you just how complicated color theory is. And when you think you have a color that's matched, it isn't. It tends to change. It will also change in value when you lay it next to another color. Another point too is value. Now, there are some people who are just so fickle and they're so gung-ho on wanting to match colors exactly. I want my frames to match my furniture. Well, one thing you shouldn't do. It should match or pick up whatever color you have in that painting. Unless it's a certificate, then that's completely different. See, I mean, things change. There's no absolutes in any of this. But the point that I'm trying to make is that when you match something or you try to get a value close, you can take a yellow and you can take a blue. If you find that right neutral, you put them together, from a distance, they look pretty close, or they blend together and they make a green, and your eye actually blends those together. You can take a red, you can take a blue, and if they're close in value, you put them together, they look like they match. So color theory in itself plays with the eye. It's elusive. It's very temperamental, and it can really frustrate you. But that's the whole idea about that. If you're going to change that color and you're going to neutralize it, we start getting into something a little more complicated, and that's called using the complementary color. Now remember in the last season, I think it was in our closing, I talked about Bob Ross. And I told you we were going to use some of his works because I do like the guy. The thing that you have to understand here is that he uses raw color. And that's where I'm going to show you how to neutralize those colors to make things tone down a little bit. Not so sharp, not so bright. They pop and look artificial. Once you understand how to neutralize colors, you're able to push those colors back, because the colors that we actually see aren't as bright as we think they are. They're actually pretty neutralized. It's the colors around them that make other colors pop. That's the whole idea behind color theory. Okay, we're going to head downstairs. I'm going to show you some of the charts and color theory using primary colors, and we're going to dabble a little bit into complementary, split complementary, and we're also going to dabble a little bit into the monochromatic and analogous colors. But I'm going to keep reminding you about these analogous and monochromatic colors as we go into the next episode, which is going to be secondary colors and how they're mixed. We're going to demonstrate some of that too. So let's head downstairs and grab my stuff here and we'll head down over into the studio. Okay. Okay. This is ridiculous. Come here. The historian was here, obviously. I'll be back. The king is not amused. Okay. Before we get back over into the studio, thought we'd do a little bit of history about color theory. As you can see behind me here is the color wheel. Well, it's probably universal, and the reason I have Leonardo here is because this is where color theory began, or the understanding of it, as we should say. Remember when I said earlier that when the first things that people start thinking about, the two major artists are either Leonardo or Michelangelo, and those are the bigger artists that we know of. Well, again, they were the giants, and Leonardo was not only an artist, he was, well, the Renaissance man, and that's the reason, that's where we get the term from. He was in and around during the time of the Renaissance, but Renaissance man simply means that he did everything. Mathematician, inventor, scientist, artist. He did it all. So how did we end up finding the complementary colors and the primary colors? Well, primary colors were discovered by Leonardo, but here's a fascinating thing. What he did is he realized that when he put these colors down on a white piece of paper, and then he closed his eyes and blinked, the opposite color would show on that blank sheet of paper. For instance, take a look at this. Here's an American flag. And I want you to look at it. It's not red, white, and blue. So you're not seeing anything wrong here. You're actually seeing it in the colors it should be. And these are the complementary colors that they should be: green, white, and orange. So keep staring at it for a while. The screen will then turn white. Keep staring at it. Once it goes white, blink your eyes rapidly, and you will see the colors red, white, and blue. 3, 2, 1, now. Blink your eyes rapidly. You see? It works with just about everything. You will see that if you do that with a white piece of paper, and after you've painted the colors and blink your eyes rapidly, it becomes more prevalent that way. You will see the opposite of what your eyes are seeing. And that's how Leonardo discovered that color wheel. Now, before we go any further, you will notice on the color wheel we have the 6 colors, the primary and secondary colors. But here's another fact. Look at that color wheel. Notice there is no brown. That's right, no brown. Because brown doesn't exist. It's actually not a color. It's a man-made color. It's something that was invented, but it's not on the color wheel. In fact, if you look at brown, once you train your eyes, you will no longer see brown as brown. You'll either see reds, you'll see yellows, you'll see blues, you'll even see greens, and a mixture of all of those put together. Brown is actually a base of red. And if you can force yourself to see that, you're also on a bigger spectrum to be able to see other things as well. Now let's take a look at these colors. I have 3 blues up here. I have 3 reds, and I have 3 yellows. Now they're not all identical. You can see that they're somewhat different in these areas. And the reason I have those in those areas is because each one of those blues, reds, and yellows represent a certain color. Here's what I'm trying to tell you. Just because, as I said earlier, you use a blue, you use a red, or you use any kind of yellow, it doesn't mean you're going to pick up those right greens, those right purples, those right oranges. And in fact, I even encourage you to use other colors such as the oranges and push those colors even more. But for this exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to practice working on just primary colors and mixing our secondary colors, which will lead us into our next episode of primary colors and secondary colors from this and that. And of course, using shade and tint. Remember, black and white. I'm going to refer to them as shade and tint and neutral for gray, so you get used to using those technical terms and you have a better understanding of that. Color theory is rather tricky, and this is just the beginning. The beginning part is somewhat easy. We know how to mix certain colors. We know how to mix 2 colors, such as red and green, and you're going to end up getting a neutral kind of a brown color because they're complementary colors. If you mix red and yellow, you're obviously going to get orange, but you're going to get the secondary color that's going to come across with that. So that's what we're going to start off. Let's start off with just the basics, okay? And then we're going to start working on secondaries, and then we'll start doing complements and split complementaries where we'll start neutralizing colors. And that'll be in the 3rd episode, and that'll come along as we move along through our vast array of learning about color theory. Color theory has been around with us for quite a bit, well, since Renaissance times, and it's been in and around, and we've been involved with it. Let's take a look at some of these paintings here. Let's take this one here, for instance, from Titian. Notice how photorealistic it looks. Well, he is a master of understanding color and understanding how to neutralize those colors. Here's another one. This one here shows the background faded out. Now, it's not just washed out. Those colors are neutralized in the background. They're to give that illusion of things being pushed back, if you will. Understanding color theory to be able to neutralize those colors will be able to allow you to be able to do that kind of work in your paintings. Now, remember earlier I was talking about how I can usually tell, especially with students, especially when they start working with sunsets, a lot of times, here's what happens. Now, I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself, but we'll come back to we'll get back to that subject again. When students start making sunsets or sunrises, they tend to use the yellows and the reds and use them in their raw area. They end up working those colors, but they don't bring in the tint to lighten those colors, to make those colors become more bold. Now, here's another thing that I want you to remember. When you're using white, never, never, never use just straight white to create something that you're trying to create a highlight. That should only be used for just a spark and pop of color. That's all it should be used for. In fact, if you look at lights, you will see they're not completely white. They have a yellow tint, they have a blue hue to them, they have different colors. They even have, some of them will have a pinkish color, green colors. They have at least a little bit of color tint to them. If you do that and you add that, your pop is going to be able to work a lot more, meaning pop, the highlight on those colors. Okay, like I said, we've talked a little bit about how these colors work, and you can see how I have these 3 colors that I'm utilizing. And as a matter of fact, what I'm going to do when we get into the studio is we are going to turn around and show you what will happen when you don't use the right blues and the right reds and you don't use the right yellows to get that. But first, before we head over to our that place, the studio, I have so many things going on in my head. We're going to go back up to the other studio where my apprentice, Jenna Fetherolf, is working. I'm going to quiz her a little bit about her color theory and see how well she works on that. Don't let anybody put anything in your head. Wait, what am I talking? He's a statue. Guys, don't put anything on his head. We'll be back. You know, just about every professional usually has an apprentice, and in this case I have, well, I've had a couple, but I have to say this is probably one of my best apprentices. Her name's Jenna Fetherolf, but we're going to see how good she really is. Watch this. Easy stuff. Hey, Jenna. Okay, watch. Got a question for you. What are the primary... Yeah, I can't even say it. What are the 3 primary colors?
Red, yellow, and blue.
Okay, that was easy. Now watch this. What are the 3 secondary colors?
Orange, purple, and green.
Watch. Let's see if she gets this. She thinks she's all that, right? Okay. All right, Jenna. What's the complementary to yellow?
Purple.
Complementary to blue?
Orange.
Red?
Green. Why'd you ask? Did you forget?
Really, Jesus. I'm gonna go back over there. What'd you do? Forget? Oh man. What'd you do? Forget? Oh,
Did you see that? What just happened?
Bacon that just got burned!
Well, as you can see, Jenna really knows her stuff. Seriously? Why do I even bother? Art is serious.
Why so serious?
Whatever. Before we head over to the studio, let's talk a little bit about where we're going to go and what we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the primary colors. as you can see on the color wheel, what I have here. Now, as you can see, we talked about that there's no brown, and that brown is a base from the other colors which combine that, okay? But we're not getting into that. But on the color wheel you're going to see here is what we've done is we divided the colors and separated them from all the other colors to the 3 primary colors. Now, don't judge on how you see these right now, because you can see the red is kind of an orangey color. That's fine. We're just looking at the basic idea of primary. Now, what does primary mean? It means that, like I said last season, it's like a prime number. You cannot reduce it any further than where it goes. You can't. That is the bottom line. That is the base number. That is the base color. So you're going to have to start off with those. Now, theoretically, if you understand how to mix all these colors, you can take any color from those 3 colors and make any color at all. Theoretically. Again, there's that word, theory. But in most likeliness, you're going to want to be able to have other colors as well. Now, notice back here, here's what we're doing first. You can see the color wheel. Now we're going to separate those, and voila, the 3 primary colors. These are going to be your fundamental basics. Okay, so once we get these down, and once you're able to understand how these colors work, you'll be able to manipulate color a little better. We're also going to use shade and tint into these colors to be able to pretty much pull up anything that we can out of these so that we can move and shift those colors, because when we turn around and we start going into the secondary colors, we're going to have to turn around and be able to neutralize the colors to push back, and we're going to be using some black. But in order to get black on this, what we're going to do is we're going to mix all colors, because unlike light, if you mix all the colors in light, you get white. Here is the opposite. You get black. Now, black is not the way you think black is, and we'll talk more about that. So let's head over to the studio, and we'll leave Leonardo the way he is. Let's go. Color theory and color itself, as you can see with these 3 colors and shade and tint. These are the colors that are going to be the foundation of working in color theory. Are you ready? Let's begin. Okay, so now we're at the point of looking at color theory. We're looking at the 3 basic colors, and as I said earlier, these 3 basic colors are the prime numbers of color: blue, red, and yellow. Now, just because we're starting off with these 3 colors, or let me put it this way, just because you have a blue, red, and yellow, you have to have a certain color in order to create other colors that look appealing to the eye. First, we're going to work on using the proper blues, reds, and yellows, and what you want to get to pull out those deep, rich colors, because without a strong foundation, or without the right colors or the right primary colors, you're not going to achieve the colors that you want. However, if you are trying to push those colors into a way that look rather disturbing or flat, neutral, then that's understandable. But in order to get to that, you have to be able to understand the rich colors you're trying to produce. And you can achieve that as well by understanding how to neutralize colors. Now, I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so let's take a look at just the primary colors. All right, so here in front of me I have is the blue, the yellow, and the red. Now, what reds should I use, and what yellows and what blues? And that's actually a really good beginning. The best kind of blue that I have found throughout my whole years, and majority of artists will tell you, is a phthalo blue. Phthalo blue has a very rich color to it, and it bends and molds really, really well. It gives you a very vibrant color, and when you add a shade to it, oh, it just adds a really beautiful sky color. The next color that I use is called a yellow medium, and this one here is used because it has just enough red, just enough blue to create that yellow and push and pull those colors in every different direction. And when you lighten this by itself, especially on those sunsets, when you add the tint to that, oh, it pops. It really gives a strong, brilliant color, like your painting's on fire if you're trying to create that. Finally, I can never ever really pronounce it right, alizarin red, and the medium. And that is you could probably even get away with a dark. I wouldn't go with a light because it's too orange. The dark tends to have a little bit more blue, so it looks a little more purple. But the medium is just right to create those rich colors that you're going to be able to pull out on. Okay? All right. And then, of course, what we have here is the tint and the shade, which we're going to work with. Now, I'm using acrylic paints to show you. Now, here is another thing. In getting into this, color theory, we're going to have to talk a little bit about pigment, we're going to talk a little bit about vehicle, and we're going to have to talk about the different mediums, such as oil, acrylic, latex, etc., all these other paints, because they have a certain reaction to mixing, and you aren't going to get the same color values or colors in an acrylic as you would with an oil, as you would with a latex. Now, why latex? Because latex is used on sets. You can also use a acrylic for sets, but those paints are extremely expensive. So unless you're working in Hollywood or you're working in Broadway and doing those kind of sets, your client is not going to want to have to pay anywhere between $70, $80, even up to $100 a gallon for that paint. It's that expensive. It can be because the colors are so rich and they're so vibrant, and they really pull out those colors for you. Now, acrylics, and as well as oils, when you're painting, will have different values. They have different series. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself because we are going to get into painting, and we're going to get into that later on. But there is a little bit of information you have to know, you should know, in color theory before you move on. Okay, I also have a few other colors, which is a yellow, a blue, yellow, and a red. Now, I'm going to show you, just because you have the three primary colors doesn't mean you're going to get those exact colors. Look how light these are, and this looks more of an orange, this looks more of a green, and this one looks more of just kind of a yellowish yellow, flat out yellow. But I'm going to show you what happens when you don't have the right colors, and I'm going to experiment and show you how these colors work. Okay, let's get started. All right, so the first color I'm going to strike up here is going to be the blue. Okay, I'm going to wipe off my palette knife because I don't want to contaminate my colors as I'm showing you this. Now, with the yellow, it's a very, very light value. And I'll put that here in the center. We don't want to contaminate that because it will pick up other color very, very well. It's the same thing with the shade of white. You can contaminate that very, very easily. You can't really do that so much with black or with the shade. As you can see, I'm getting it on my hands, but it tends to get kind of messy and all over the place. And then finally, I'm going to add a touch of my red, which is going to be over here on this side. There we go. All right, so I have my three basic colors. Once I have these colors now, I can mix these colors. Now, I'm not going to mix yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the shade and the tint. Shade, tint. And show you, demonstrate exactly why they're not colors, as I showed you earlier. All right, so if we take the shade or black, I'm going to place it down here on the bottom. Put some here. I'll move some here. And I'm going to move some here. And then finally, I'm going to add my shade. I got to make sure that this is completely clean because I don't want to contaminate any of my shade or white Because once you get it contaminated, that's it. You're not going to get the full shade value that you need to have. And I'm going to add some here, pull some of that over here, and pull that here. Okay, now I am all set. Now, here's what I'm going to do. As I said earlier, if I take this color and slide it up this way, and I come up here to add some of the shade, you can see it does not change the hue at all. All it's doing, I can now contaminate this, is changing the value. That is still blue. And I can bring this all the way up to this beautiful light blue. Look at that. But nevertheless, the color is still the same. That's the same thing if I go with my shade or black. If I pull my black up, I'm going to pull my color down. And in order to darken this, I'm going to pull this down. And therefore, it becomes a darker blue. Okay? Let's do the same thing with the yellow. I probably should have started off with yellow because it's the lightest value in color. And you know what? I'm going to be right back because I'm going to get some more paper towels. As you can see, I'm getting rather messy. Oh, we're back. All right, so taking my palette knife. Now, a palette knife is really good to be mixing your paints instead of just taking your brush and then mixing it right in that brush. Again, we're getting into painting, so I am not going to discuss too much why I'm using the palette knife because we'll be talking about that a little later. All right, so again, I'm going to take my yellow, push it up. And being that I'm on the yellow, I'm going to push this down too. And now I'm going to bring that yellow down, or that white, excuse me, the shade, the tint. And you can see now how I've lightened this up. Again, the value or the color itself does not change. The value does. It becomes lighter and darker. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to pull just now. You're not going to need much black on this. Okay, you're not really going to need that much at all. I'm going to pull this up. Look at that. I have a whole bunch. If I carry that all the way over, I'm going to contaminate this. I'm going to pull this down. Look at that. See, if I get in here, look at that. It doesn't take much black to change this here. There we go. Okay. And then finally, the red, I'm going to pull this red up, pull it back down this way, pull this. Now, here is a really good factor, or little tidbit of information. This doesn't turn into a light red. Oh, what's it turn into? It turns into pink. It is the only color that we change differently that we don't call light red. We call it pink. And there we go. You can see how that changes. And then, of course, if I come here and bring this black up, that is going to change. Now, there, you can see the differences in why black and white are not colors. They simply change the value of the color itself. So you can see how these colors actually work and how they're actually setting themselves up to be able to change that. Now, that's going to be information you're going to need when we get into monochromatic colors and we get into analogous colors. But right now we're just looking at how these colors work. All right, so the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around. I'm going to take, and it's going to kind of lead into our secondary colors, which is the next episode that we're going to talk about. So if I take my, and this is where these colors have to be really, really, you have to have a good base on your primary colors in order to get the next color right. All right, so I'm going to add right here. Oh, I got a touch of red there. A little contamination. And then I'm going to add a touch of blue. Now, I don't need much blue. The reason I don't is because the value of this is so much darker than the yellow. As a matter of fact, that might even be too much for the amount of yellow I have on here. And then I'm going to mix this in. And look at that. I didn't use very much. Look at that green. And that's because you have a good basis on that color. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump a little bit ahead, and I'm going to watch what happens when I add a little bit on my secondary color. I'm going to add some of this yellow or this white here, and I'm going to pull this up. Look at that light green. And again, the color does not change. I'm going to pull this down, and I'm going to add just a touch of black here, and that changes that value into a darker green. See that? Okay, let's do orange. We're going to add, again, I'm going to go with my yellow here, and I'm going to go with just a very small amount of pigment of red. There we go. See how much? It's not very much. And I'm going to mix that in, and that's the reason is because the value of the yellow is so light. Look at that. Ooh, look at that orange. Okay. Again, I'm going to add some white here. That's going to allow me to pull this orange right up. Look at that. And pull it right out this way. Now, I'm going to add the black shade. And again, I'm not going to add very much, just about that there. And that's probably way too much there in itself. Remember, black is, if you're going to use black, I strongly recommend you use just very little. You don't need a lot of black from the tube in order to create these kind of darks. That's where a lot of students, they start doing everything with black, and it's like, stay away from that black. In fact, when I teach classes, they aren't allowed to use black. They have to mix their own black. All right? And you can see how the different color shades is. Now, the last one I'm going to do is a purple, and that's going to be the red. I'm going to squeeze that right over here. I'll put it right here. Because usually it would be between here and here, but I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to bring in my blue. Oh, look at that purple. Oh, that's rich. Oh, that looks good. Now, from the camera, that probably looks like black, but wait till I add yellow to that. Because blue or purple is a complementary color to yellow, which neutralizes. You'll see. All right, so now I'm going to add the white, and you're going to see this purple really pop. And my white here. And I want to pull this purple up. Look at that. Oh. Yeah, I get excited about color. Color is just wonderful. Look at that. Woo! Beautiful, 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 beautiful. And then, of course, if I pull this down and I add my black, boom. I'm going to pull that out. But you can see how these colors lighten with the shade, lighten with the tint, and then darken with the shade. Now, let me just show you how to mix that black. As you saw, I took my blue, and I'm going to do it over here on this side here. And I'm going to take my red, mix that up with a nice, look at that color. That looks really, really delicious, huh? Okay, now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a substantial amount of yellow. And the reason I'm coming in with a substantial amount is because it's going to get swallowed up. There is your black. Okay. Look at that black. And that's how you mix your black. That's how you get a true black. Working with your image, which looks phenomenal once you're able to work that up really, really, really well. Okay? All right, so if I take my shade, I keep calling my tint my shade, and I pull this up. Look at that. I have this wonderful, wonderful gray right here. So I want to pull a little bit more of my tint. Squeeze that a little bit more. Whoops. Get up there, fellow. All right, look at that. And that's such a warm looking gray right there. Look at that. And then, of course, if I add black, that only darkens my value here and pulls that down into that there. Okay? All right. All right, so what I've shown you are the basics, the fundamentals of color. Now, here's what I want you to do is to practice that, utilizing these colors. Now, I'm running a little short on time, so I'm going to show you these colors on the next episode. And I'm going to show you when we do our primary color or secondary colors, how these colors are not, let me hold them up for you here. These colors here are not going to get the same colors as you have here on these secondary colors, this purple, this orange, and this green here. And you're going to see that. But I'm going to save that for you on the next episode. So we'll hang on to these here, and we're going to work on those a little later. Okay, so this here is your fundamental areas of looking into your basic color mixture. Here's what I suggest. Purchase these colors here that you can, acrylics. Don't go with oils. Trust me, just stay with the acrylics. Stay away from the student grade paint. Don't go there. That also will determine on how well your color is going to come out. So stay away from those colors themselves. Get in there with your either thick paste or your higher grade. They're going to be a bit more expensive, but you're only going to need one tube again. A tube of this. Again, you're going to want your phthalo blue, cadmium yellow medium, and alizarin red medium. Those are the ones you're going to want to get, those three colors there. Then of course you're going to get a tube of black and a tube of white. Now, actually I'd recommend not to get black. You're going to mix that so you get used to not having to run to your black. Your black should always should be used just to pop those little shadows, okay? All right. Well, as usual, may the Lord be with you always, and practice working on mixing these colors. On the next episode, we're going to work on monochromatic, analogous, and the secondary colors, and we're going to work on these colors to show you when you don't have the right blues, the right yellows, and the right reds, you're not going to get the right secondary colors, which is going to throw everything off. So it's important that you have that. All right? We will see you next week. Now remember, like, share, subscribe. It's only getting more fun from here on in because now we're going to start working with color and start playing around with that. And we will see you on the next episode of artifacts.
¡Pantalabamba!